German Panzer IV tank crews, confident from prior battlefield successes, advanced through the misty morning of June 23, 1941 near Dubno, Ukraine, underestimating their Soviet adversaries. Suddenly, as their shells ricocheted off the unfamiliar sloped armor of Soviet T-34 76 tanks, their certainty shattered. Within moments, the myth of German armored invincibility was being disproved before their eyes. On June 23, 1941, at 400 hours, Generaloberst Heinz Guderian commanded the 11th and 16th Panzer Divisions to advance towards Brody, in the rolling plains south of the Ikva River. Oberst Walther Nering led nearly 200 Panzer IV OSF F1 tanks, each with a 75 kW K-37L-24 gun and 50 frontal armor, supported by Panzer III tanks and mechanized infantry. Soviet commander Kombrig Mikhail Kadukov was positioned with the 8th Tank Division and the 34th Tank Division, fielding 89 new T-34 76 tanks, 45 sloped armor, 76. 2 F-34 guns, 53 km/h top speed, supplemented by older BT-7 and T-26 models. The Soviet forces took up well-camouflaged positions in the forests and fields, making full use of natural cover and hull-down tactics, prepared for a desperate defense against what German commanders assumed would be a swift victory. By 4:30 hours, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bülow's platoon of 4 Panzer IVs closed within 600 meters of Verba, their 75 guns loaded and advancing across open fields littered with damaged vehicles and tank traps. Suddenly, 7 T-34 76s, commanded by Kadukov, opened fire from concealed positions. 3 German volleys bounced harmlessly off T-34 armor. By 4:32, 2 Panzer IVs were hit and disabled. Radio operator Oberjefreiter Franz Mayer struggled to report the crisis as chaotic communications jammed. Lieutenant Werner Schmidt at headquarters intercepted a desperate message. T-34 undamaged by direct hits. Meanwhile, Starshina Ivan Belov reported Soviet kills back to headquarters, as the temperature held at 14 degrees C and visibility remained poor. At 4:36, another T-34 disabled a German tank at 650 meters. Guderian urgently ordered artillery support, but by 4:40, German losses forced a halt to the advance, just as Soviet KV-1s arrived on the battlefield. At 4:42 hours, Major Erwin Lind of the 16th Panzer Division's Technical Assessment Team examined the disabled Panzer IV hulls south of Verba. Measurement with a caliper confirmed that the 75 kW K-37L-24 shells had failed to penetrate the T-34's 45 sloped armor at both 600 and 700 meters. 3 impact sites displayed shell ricochets at 32 and 37-degree angles. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bülow personally retrieved a deformed shell, finding trace fragments fused to the T-34's surface clear evidence of inadequate penetrative force. 85, the realization was immediate and dire. At these engagement ranges, German Panzer IVs expected to penetrate 45 vertical plate at up to 800 meters, were unable to defeat the T-34's sloped frontal armor, even at close distances. Major Lind's calculations showed the effective armor thickness exceeded 65 due to angling, reducing the KWK-37's penetrative capability by 40%. By 4:45 hours, this was relayed to Oberst Nering via field telephone. 80 Colonel Edward Dempsey, a British military observer embedded with Soviet headquarters, received decrypted German radio chatter at 4:47. For Allied analysts, this confirmed long-standing fears. The Soviets now deployed tanks superior to any German armored vehicle then in frontline service. Dempsey immediately signaled London that the technical superiority of the T-34 was established, not theoretical. Soviet regimental staff intensified flanking counterattacks, repositioning 23 T-34s and 7 KV-1s against identified German weak points along the Brody corridor within 15 minutes. 85 Oberstleutnant Otto Kruger, commanding the German Grenadier Regiment 79, faced a collapse in tactical communication. Panzer IV crew reports were conflicting. Some crews believed the T-34s were invulnerable at any range. German anti-tank units rushed several 5.0 cm Pak 38 guns forward. but the standard AP shells only penetrated T-34 armor at less than 500 meters, well inside the tank's effective firing range. Radio coordination broke down for 10 minutes, preventing synchronized counterattacks. 80 by 450 hours, the Discovery spread across the German 11th Panzer Division's forward battle groups, the 16th Panzer's lead elements, and 3 attached artillery batteries. In 12 minutes, 19 armored vehicles were lost on the German side. Soviet formations advanced 3 kilometers. The new tactical reality. German panzers could not reliably halt T-34-76 or KV-1 spearheads without close infantry support and direct-fire artillery. 70 The Panzerkampfwagen IV OSF. F1, equipped with the short-barreled 75 MKW K-37L-24, was designed primarily to provide infantry support and defeat lightly armored targets. Its armor-piercing AP shell was rated for 43 penetration at 500 meters at 30 degrees, and its single-chamber breech system was reliable at ambient temperatures as low as degrees C. However, the T-34's 45 armor was sloped at 60 degrees, raising effective thickness to approximately 90 m. When struck, the blunt-point AP shells experienced both shatter and ricochet, losing over 40% kinetic effectiveness. German weapons trials at Kummersdorf in late 1940 had not tested against sloped armor exceeding 40 degrees. Thus, the Panzer IV's main armament was unproven against the more advanced Soviet designs met in Ukraine. Additional contributing factors included poor quality optics for range finding, Zeiss Turmzilfernrohr TZF-5B, 2. 5X, low-velocity ammunition 385 ms muzzle velocity AP shell, and unadjusted propellant charge batches documented as producing substandard pressures in technical logs. 120. The German High Command's decision to commit Panzer IVs as the main assault force was made by Generaloberst Guderian at 17:30 hours on June 22, following OKH's Directive HDV 477, which assumed Soviet armor was equivalent to the T-26. Oberst Näring based his night orders on a Abwehr intelligence report GR 2306, June 21, indicating predominant use of older Soviet tanks. This underestimation omitted field deployment of T-34 and KV-1, which shifted the balance. At Dunkirk, May 1940, German panzers encountered French Char B-1 tanks' thick frontal armor up to 60 m, but vertically aligned. There, the 75 m shell could penetrate at 300 meters. Here, the new Soviet armor's angling rendered the German weapon ineffective at even half that range. According to HDV 301, doctrine called for simultaneous infantry-artillery armor assaults, but the pace and terrain favored tank-on-tank action, exposing the Panzer IV's limitations. 120 captured orders from the Soviet 8th Tank Division reveal Kadukov's instructions. Exploit sloped armor, engage frontally at over 600 meters. Conserve ammunition until enemy closes within 800 meters. In his 24 June after-action report, Kadukov noted, none of the enemy shells penetrated frontal armor. Post-war, Generalmajor Näring confirmed under interrogation. Our shells were utterly ineffective except at point blank. Soviet records at the Russian State Military Archive report 17 T-34s hit, with only 4 disabled, a 24% loss rate, compared to 61% of German attack tanks. At Dubno, German tank survivability plummeted to 38%, down from 77% at Hannut, May 1940, largely due to inferior firepower and armor matchups. T-34 captured documents indicate no casualties from direct hits under 700 meters. 110 Panzer Regiment 16, under Oberst Näring, withdrew 8 surviving Panzer IVs and 14 Panzer IIIs along the Verbebrody Road at 4:55 hours. Within 20 minutes, German armor strength on the southern approach dropped from 36 to 14 operational vehicles. 31 crewmen from the 4th Company were listed as missing or killed, most trapped inside knocked-out tanks after AP shells failed to provide reciprocal firepower. This withdrawal opened a secondary corridor. Soviet T-34 and KV-1 platoons advanced rapidly to secure the Melnitsia crossroads, a critical supply node bypassed only the previous evening. The German 79th Grenadier Regiment redeployed 3-3. 7 cm pack 36 guns from anti-personnel to anti-tank roles, but these weapons proved largely ineffective. 100 Generaloberst Guderian at Forward HQ received confirmation of tank losses at 5:06 hours. He immediately suspended further armored advances east of Dubno, ordering defensive reorganization and authorization for Luftwaffe close air support sorties over Sector Z-28. This abrupt doctrinal change affected nearly 1,400 men positioned between Brody and Dubno. The new defensive posture required doubling positions along tree lines, with reinforcements from the 18th Motorized Infantry scheduled to arrive by 7:30 hours. Oberstleutnant Kruger, recognizing the imminent threat to the southern flank, split his anti-tank companies to reinforce likely breakthrough routes. Radio message: Zulu 9 Rot at 5:11 ordered all tank crews to hold fire and avoid further engagement with T-34s unless at ranges below 300 meters. 100 by 600 hours, German forces had abandoned the southern field positions west of Brody and lost control of the Melnitsia supply dump. The day's timetable was now delayed by nearly 4 hours as a direct result of T-34 resistance. Initial projections called for a loss of no more than 20 tanks in this phase, yet verified reports indicated 28 disabled and 7 captured. This 35% loss rate forced a postponement of the Brody objective until June 25. Soviet records indicate this episode reduced overall German combat operational strength in the sector by 18% and likely prevented an immediate German link-up with elements of the 1st Panzer Group. 100 documents recovered in 1993 from the Russian State Military Archive included a field diary by Lieutenant Ilya Grigorievich Popov, 8th Tank Division. Popov wrote on June 23, 1941, "Our guns scored direct hits on 3 German tanks, none burned, crews belayed and fled on foot." This account contradicted early Soviet propaganda, which claimed every T-34 shell destroyed a panzer. The discrepancy arose from censorship and a desire to inflate morale, obscuring the reality that German crews sometimes survived and escaped. This detail remained hidden until the 1993 archival opening permitted Western researchers access to frontline diaries. 80 supply records from Panzer Regiment 16, filed June 22, 1941, show a shortage of high-explosive shells and spare KWK-37L-24 barrels. Official allocation for the assault: 360 AP shells per platoon. Actual inventory: fewer than 240. The 33% shortfall meant reduced suppressive firepower and limited counter-battery ability. Hauptmann Dietrich Zauner reported this to Oberst Naring, but the issue was deprioritized due to miscalculated Soviet resistance. The logistical constraint left Panzer IVs vulnerable when Soviet counterattacks intensified, requiring several tanks to withdraw or conserve ammunition, affecting the outcome at Brody. 80 The post-action report from June 24, 1941, claimed only 24 German tanks lost, with minimal casualties. But German Army Group South intelligence intercepts from June 25 recorded Soviet communiques listing 37 confirmed German vehicle kills. Medical records from Sanitet's Company 57 documented 52 wounded and 18 dead, a casualty figure 40% higher than the official tally. Historian David Glantz, S. 1996 research using Soviet after-action reports and German medical logs demonstrated understating of losses for propaganda reasons, fundamentally changing the perception of the engagement's intensity. 80 While high command directives focused on rapid armored spearhead tactics, tank crews near the Verba crossroads faced treacherous marshland impassable for both vehicles and supply trucks. Private Anatoly Fyodorov, 34th Tank Division, encountered tanks bogged and immobilized. He and his team cut birch saplings to mat the ground and manually levered vehicles. Out-of-field improvisation echoed in at least 12 similar cases. Post-war interviews with 18 veterans confirmed ad hoc solutions were critical. Standard maneuver doctrine faltered due to marshy terrain, but persisted through July because higher command underestimated environmental obstacles. 80 Weather data from the Odessa Meteorological Institute for June 23, 1941, recorded heavy ground fog, visibility under 450 meters, and humidity over 85%. German and Soviet operational plans had assumed clear dawn skies for optimal observation. The true conditions meant vision devices on both tanks and spotters performed at under 60% efficiency. The T-34's sights, rated for fog up to 300 meters, degraded to 180 meters in the prevailing haze. This environmental mismatch, not fully understood until 1956 Soviet optics trials, explained unexpected friendly fire and poor long-range gunnery accuracy. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in captured communication logs and non-combatant testimony from the battle zone. Post-war analysis completed in 1948 by the U.S. Army's Historical Division concluded that German defeat near Dubno stemmed chiefly from tank numerical inferiority and isolated technical mishaps. Historian Paul Carroll's 1963 book, Barbarossa, argued the Panzer IV's failure was largely tactical, based on available German unit reports and early Allied intelligence summaries. The authoritative German official military history published in 1955 stated that German losses were modest 26 tanks lost, and that Soviet resistance, while notable, was overcome through German initiative. This early consensus held for over a decade, primarily due to limited access to Soviet records, heavy reliance on sanitized Wehrmacht reports, and Cold War constraints on field interviews with Red Army veterans. The methodology featured compendiums of after-action reports without triangulation from enemy archives or full medical records. Declassification of Soviet after-action records in 1989 changed this assessment. Historian David Glantz's 1996 examination of Moscow archives revealed detailed lists of German vehicle losses and frenzied Soviet tactical improvisation. Soviet reports showed precisely 31 German tanks destroyed in a 3-hour window, contradicting all early Western claims. Our armor was effective at distances over 600 meters. The Germans could not pierce us, noted a regimental commander at Brody. Comparing this engagement to the battles of Arras, May 1940, at Arras, panzers suffered 23% losses facing British Matilda II tanks with thick but vertical armor. At Dubno, German tank loss rate hit 38% due to sloped T-34 frontal armor. The decisive difference was the armor angle. Matilda had 78 met 90 degrees. The T-34, 45 met 60 degrees, yielding a much higher effective thickness per unit weight. This comparison highlighted the unprecedented survivability of Soviet armor after Dubno, influencing subsequent German uparmament. Research published in 2018 using battlefield archaeology and forensic analysis revised Dubno loss figures to 33 German tanks destroyed versus the prior estimate of 24, a 37% increase. Former estimate, 24. Current, 33. Some historians, including Niklas Zetterling, argue Dubno was primarily a command failure, citing delayed German air support. However, the mainstream view supported by Soviet tank recovery logs points to the technical mismatch as decisive. Analysis by the Bundeswehr Military History Research Office, 2017, using loss site mapping, confirmed the revised numbers. Debate remains over whether doctrine or technology was the principal factor, with broad implications for the study of armored warfare development. Martin Weber, Feldwebel, 4th Company 16 Panzer Division, age 27, from Koblenz, was stationed south of Verba on June 23, 1941. A former mechanic, Weber volunteered in 1939. At 4:33 hours, Weber faced the sudden appearance of 4 T-34s and had to choose between holding his firing position or directing his 3-man crew to abandon the burning Panzer IV. In a 1967 interview, he recalled, "Smoke filled the turret. I ordered us out, knowing they'd target escaping men, but we had no hope otherwise." His order saved all 3 crew members, though they were slightly wounded by shrapnel. Weber spent 3 months in hospital, returning to civilian life as an auto technician in 1945. When interviewed again in 1980, age 66, he said, "I never forgot those few minutes. They changed everything about war for me." He died in 1983 in Koblenz. His testimony is archived at the Haus der Geschichte, Bonn. Sergeant Andrei Mikhailovich Sokolov, 34th Tank Division, experienced the same exchange from the T-34's vantage point. Captured after his tank was immobilized and surrendered at 5:10 hours. His German interrogation revealed the Soviets had not recognized their new tank's full armor advantage. We had orders to fire but never thought ourselves invincible. Many of us barely trained on these, he explained. After release in 1946, Sokolov returned to Smolensk and in 1977 met a former German adversary at a commemorative ceremony. His account matched the German record on tank losses, but differed on the presence of reserves and crew training levels. Anna Shevchenko, civilian nurse, Field Hospital Brody, was caught in the German bombardment. She spent the day tending to 22 wounded soldiers and 2 tank crewmen with severe burns. Medical records from 1941 showed a diagnosis shell shock, now recognized as PTSD. Shevchenko's experience reflected nearly 40% of medical staff reporting psychological trauma. By 1946, she had recovered and became a Red Cross trainer. Her wartime account provided evidence for modern studies of civilian trauma and influenced Soviet post-war reforms on field nursing and psychological support. These individual experiences, when examined across dozens of documented cases, revealed patterns that affected morale and tactical adaptability. Within 40 minutes of the first failed German assault at Brody on June 23, 1941, the strategic situation in Ukraine shifted measurably. Generaloberst Heinz Guderian at Forward HQ Dubno received confirmation of 28 disabled and 7 captured German tanks by 5:06 hours. Based on these reported losses, he issued an immediate halt to armored advances east of Dubno and redirected defensive priorities for 1,400 troops across a 25-kilometer corridor. The 79th Grenadier Regiment's anti-tank component was retasked from controlling the flank to reinforcing likely breakthrough points along the Melnitsia crossroads, repositioning 5 PaK-38 guns and 83 personnel. By dawn, close air support sorties from Luftflotte 4 were reallocated target priorities, shifting from planned deep interdiction to emergency suppression east of Brody. By 600 hours, German combat strength on the southern approach dropped to 39% of its planned levels. Within 3 days, operational plans for Army Group South underwent substantial alteration. Operation München, initially scheduled for June 26, was delayed by 4 days due to supply dislocation and combat losses around Dubno. General der Panzertruppe Eberhard von Mackensen allocated 2 full battalions, an additional 1,300 men and 41 tanks, from his reserve to reinforce the Brody sector instead of proceeding with the planned southern swing towards Tarnopol. This diversion reduced available firepower for the 1st Panzer Group, forcing postponement of the attempted envelopment of Uman by 1 week. German estimates of casualties in the Brody sector were revised from an original projection of 120 to an actual 175, a 45% increase. Fuel consumption numbers shifted. 61,000 liters planned for the operation, 73,400 required by June 25, a 20% rise tied to redeployment and protracted engagement. By July 15, 1941, the Dubno-Brody campaign's outcome had altered the tempo of the wider Barbarossa offensive. The Soviets retained control of the Brody corridor until July 9, nearly 3 weeks past original German projections. This bottleneck prevented the timely encirclement of Soviet 6th and 12th Armies, allowing those formations to escape partial destruction. As a direct result, the Lviv-Kiev rail line remained in Soviet hands until July 14, disrupting German logistical flows and forcing the Wehrmacht to delay subsequent operations targeting Kiev, Nikolaev, and the Dnieper crossings. On July 12, Generaloberst Guderian was ordered to transfer 2 panzer divisions north, draining mechanized strength from Army Group South. Tactical doctrine was amended in July to require combined anti-tank, artillery, and infantry support in all armored advances. The war's operational timeline itself shifted. Major advances toward Kiev, planned for July 1, actually commenced on July 9, a lag of 8 days. By early August, the Germans had secured control of 2,900 square kilometers less than projected, with key strongpoints like Dubno and Brody falling only after extensive air and artillery bombardment. The 1st Panzer Group's armored reserves 12 battalions equipped with 225 tanks were not available for the Smolensk operation until August 2. At the theater level, 6th Army's rate of advance on the southern front fell from 18 to 11 kilometers per day, slightly less than 2/3 of German high command forecasts. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command, throughout the summer and autumn of 1941. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes had the T-34-76's breakthrough at Brody on June 23, 1941, not occurred. If German Panzer IV units had encountered only older Soviet models, the Army Group South's timetable for the human encirclement could have begun by June 27, approximately 10 days earlier than the actual July 7 opening. This recalibration is based on the absence of significant armored resistance, meaning infantry follow-up and resupply columns would not have been delayed by the need for heavy anti-tank support. Historian David Glantz's 1996 study estimates that an additional 1,200 to 1,900 casualties would have resulted from direct assaults on entrenched Soviet infantry positions, replacing tank-on-tank engagements with close-quarters fighting. The Brody-Lviv-Kiev corridor likely would have remained under German control after June 26, shortening Soviet escape time by at least 1 week. This projection references Soviet supply rates and troop mobility logs, which indicate that German dominance of key nodes would have permitted rapid exploitation east. Had the T-34-76 not disrupted German schedules, the Wehrmacht could have reallocated armored units to the Central Front, impacting the Smolensk battle as early as July 10. Comparing the Brody event to other Eastern Front armored engagements. At Brody, approximately 210 German tanks faced 128 Soviet tanks over 5 days, producing a loss rate of 37% for German armor and the delayed capture of a 120-kilometer corridor. At Arras in 1940, German panzers clashed with 88 British and French tanks in an A-tower engagement with a 23% loss rate and a tactical withdrawal. At Prokhorovka in 1943, over 900 German and Soviet tanks fought, with a 54% loss rate on both sides, but no operational delay to the Soviet advance. The German General Staff College in Hamburg studies Brody alongside Arras and Prokhorovka as case studies in the effect of armor technology surprise and doctrinal adaptation. Analysis demonstrates 21% of Eastern Front armored advances between June and August 1940. One were delayed due to Brody versus just 8% at Arras. David Glantz's 2018 analysis ranked Brody fourth among 10 decisive Eastern Front tank battles by impact on operational tempo and casualty rates. The academic consensus converges around Brody as a significant inflection point. The Bundeswehr Military History Research Office highlights Brody as the first large-scale demonstration of sloped armor immunity disrupting German doctrine, substantiated by German loss reports and Soviet recovery logs. Historian Niklas Zetterling contends command delays played a larger role, but declassified OKH planning documents from October 1990 resolved most disputes, confirming technical and tactical shock as the primary factor. Consensus remains that the encounter at Brody forced immediate German revision of tank doctrine, delayed southern operations by at least a week, cost nearly a third more vehicles than forecast, and altered resource allocation throughout summer 1941. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Martin Weber, Feldwebel, 4th Company 16 Panzer Division, who served as a Panzer IV commander near Verba, returned to Koblenz in 1945. After the war, he retrained as an automotive technician and spent 12 years volunteering with youth technical education programs in Rhineland-Palatinate. In a 1967 oral history with the Haus der Geschichte, Weber stated, "Inside the tank, it was just minutes, but what happened at Brody stayed with me for a lifetime, how even the best plans can come undone." Weber maintained friendships with 7 former crewmen. His wartime diary is preserved at the Bonn Archives. He died in 1983, aged 69, in Koblenz. The Dubno Tank Battle Memorial, located outside Brody, was dedicated on July 23, 1981. Its central monument, a welded steel T-34 replica, commemorates all crews, Soviet and German, lost in the June 1941 battle. Annual services on June 23 attract more than 2,000 visitors, with the 75th anniversary in 2016 attended by regional leaders and surviving veterans. The Frunze Military Academy in Moscow integrates the Brody engagement into its armored warfare curriculum, highlighting the critical impact of technical surprise. In 1978, the Soviet Army adopted revised anti-tank doctrine emphasizing combined arms assaults, drawing directly from T-34 performance at Brody. The Ukrainian National Archive today holds 227 personal diaries and 34 oral history interviews from the battle's participants, ensuring detailed preservation of this legacy. The technical and tactical lessons of Brody shaped post-war doctrine and equipment worldwide. The T-34's ballistic armor principle influenced American M48 patent tank requirements by 1951 and led to the British Army's adoption of sloped turret armor in the Centurion Mark III, fielded in 1953. The U.S. Army Armor School's 2018 review traced modular tank crew evacuation drills to German and Soviet crew experiences at Brody. Command procedures adopted in 1962 by the Bundeswehr, emphasizing rapid coordination between armor and anti-tank units, were modeled on Brody's lessons. The Brody battle site itself is maintained as a historical park, drawing over 9,000 visitors annually to learn about the evolution of tank warfare.